A warm welcome to you all, artists, policymakers, producers, presenters, journalists, colleagues, joining us here for the Perform Europe Impact event at beautiful Beaux-Arts in Brussels. And an equally warm welcome to all of you many who are following us and are going to be with us today via our live stream. I'm Ása Ríkharðsdóttir, a middle-aged white woman, Secretary General of ITM and Chair of Perform Europe, and I will be your host today. We, the Perform Europe partners, ITM, IFA, ETN, Circus Strata, and ED Consults, are excited to share with you today what we are doing now, how we see the future, and what we have learned with the kind help of many of our colleagues joining us here on this stage. Representatives of the European Commission, stakeholders and professionals that have contributed to the project, our Perform Europe jury, our advisory group, and most importantly, the Perform Europe artists, producers and presenters who are still on tour across Creative Europe, testing new models on how to work across borders in a sustainable and inclusive way. All this to come. But first, I want to introduce to you Magdalena Liskova, Head of Institutional Relations, Beaux-Arts, our co-producer of this event. Welcome.
Good afternoon and welcome at the Center for Fine Arts, Beaux-Arts. As you know, we are recently going through an extremely sad time in the Palace, and it is indeed not easy for me to deliver a speech for the first time since Sophie Lauwers, our CEO and artistic director, passed away. I had the great honor and the privilege to work with her during the last months on the way of how to implement her vision she had for Beaux-Arts, and of course sustainability and inclusion were the main objectives she had for her mandate. And I believe that it is our duty to keep this legacy alive. Already this approach was introduced in the Project Palace, an exhibition that is celebrating 100 years since the idea of the Center for Fine Arts was conceived. It is a reflection of the past as well as it is look towards the future. It is about challenging what is known and reflecting on what is unknown, and exploring and also asking ourselves how arts institutions in the 21st century could look like. Among other topics, multiple artists we invited to contribute to the exhibition were reflecting on sustainability of the building, of the production, as well as of the arts itself. And I would like to invite you, if you would have in the coming days a moment to come to see the exhibition and see the reflection for yourself. But when we talk about performing arts, more challenges come into account. Already the production chain of an artistic performance involves so many fields, so many industries, so many people. And this is, at least for me personally, also what makes it the favorite part of our work. The real human exchanges, the encounters performing arts enable during their creations, and even more during their performing presentations. And these encounters multiple when it comes to their touring. I therefore thank Perform Europe and all the partners for looking into and proposing new ways of touring and inviting Beaux-Arts to join this soon-to-be sustainable journey. And I wish you an insightful and inspiring meeting here at Beaux-Arts and online. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Magdalena. we are most grateful to be here together at this historic and contemporary art center. And I would like to, on behalf of all of us, offer our sincerest condolences to Sophie's family and to the whole team of Beaux-Arts. I'm going to give you a few words about Perform Europe. But first, we, the partners, want to express solidarity with our partner in Ukraine and the whole Ukrainian performing arts sector. It is good to remind ourselves at a moment of sharing like this that there is a war going on in Europe. So what is Perform Europe? Perform Europe is a project meant to rethink how performing arts works are presented across borders in a more inclusive, sustainable and balanced way. It includes a research phase, launching of a digital platform, testing a support scheme, and designing policy recommendations. We will finalize all these tasks by the end of this month. Perform Europe is funded by the Creative Europe program of the European Union and co-initiated by a consortium composed of IATM, International Network for the Contemporary Performing Arts, the European Festival Association, Circus Strata Network, European Dance House Network, and EDI Consult. It has been a humbling yet exhilarating experience for us to lead this project. To get a chance to shape and run a potentially new funding scheme on a European level is a privilege. To seek and discover hundreds of artists and presenters who genuinely want to alter the way we tour, to bring to the forefront artists who demonstrate sustainable practices, presenters who give the stage to disabled artists, queer artists, feminist artists. To see partnerships being formed where 14 out of 19 cases, it is the artists and the producers that are in the driving seat, not the presenters. To see new alternative ways being executed, giving ownership to the artistic process, slowing down, letting go, touring of ideas, not sets, empowering new voices. This and much more is what we in the consortium have seen happening in the course of the project. And we have learned a lot. Such a scheme has been called for many years, and we are very happy to give thanks to the European Commission, knowing that Perform Europe will continue. In short, this has been our journey. We have researched the context of the performing arts, how they've toured across borders in the past years. We have surveyed and questioned the performing arts sector at large and discovered many gaps and inequalities in terms of position, power, capacity, infrastructure, economy, ability to show one's work, access to the market. A few challenging highlights for you. As part of the research, we have pictured the main touring and presentation flows. On the slides that are here, you see where the artists are from on the left side, and on the right side, you see where they go with their work. To no surprise, Western European artists are at the most advantaged position, followed by their peers in the north, south, east, and artists in the Balkans and the Eastern Partnership countries are generally mostly cut off from the European touring map. We have also mapped support programs. In short, 565 programs were identified. More than 50% of those are schemes which are concentrated in Western and Northern Europe. These are just two examples from our very extensive research. Armed with this knowledge, we designed an open call for artists and presenters to take part in the testing of Perform Europe, and this is still going on until the end of this month. 1,327 took part in the first step of the call, 508 in the second, and the end result was that our jury selected 88 producers and presenters, jointly forming 19 partnerships. They have now toured 41 artistic works, more than 250 times in over 90 locations across the Creative Europe region. We are just about to deliver our main report to the European Commission, including our learnings and recommendations of what a future Perform Europe program could look like, and how our learnings could help to advance sustainable practices, inclusive priorities, and geographical balance in other European funding programs. And we do so with pride, because the work of the 19 Perform Europe partnerships has shown that it is possible and feasible to change the way we show art and work together across borders. Now, I am happy to welcome a key person from our contractual authority, the European Commission, with a few opening remarks. I give you the one and only Barbara Gessler, Head of UNIP of Creative Europe at the European Commission.
Thank you very much, Ausa, and I'm very happy to be here. And it's really a pleasure to see all of you. Happy faces, sunshine, despite some very difficult circumstances that we heard about, in particular for this place. I would like to stress on behalf of the European Commission that Perform Europe has been quite a ride, but it's been also a very successful and ambitious project. We have seen that it has corresponded to the major challenges that we are all facing currently in the creative and cultural sectors in Europe. You have mentioned them: climate change, inequality, digitization, the impact of the pandemic. But we have seen also in this short but intense period that Perform Europe has actually managed and succeeded in offering kind of a systemic approach to those challenges, and this is quite new. The performing arts sectors, we have also seen, has been pioneering this innovative support scheme, and we do really believe that other cultural and creative sectors can benefit a lot from the lessons that you have learned over the past years and all the knowledge that you have generated together in the project implementation. And I would like to stress, looking at no one in particular, but maybe a little bit at Nan, that this has been also a very authentic project, because it was designed and led bottom up by the performing arts networks, representing all segments and disciplines of performing arts. And it has been a project that we were kindly but consequently pushed to do. Do it, and we did. So I think that's already something that we can be proud of, because it doesn't always happen. And this for the sector, from the sector, we think is also a unique selling point of this particular project and makes it so relevant. And of course, we acknowledge that this was a pilot project, and it could not have solved, even addressed all the problems that exist. But I think we have really seen the revelation of the most pressing or the most burning challenges that exist. You mentioned them, Ausa, the geographical imbalances that you have witnessed, unfair practices that may exist, lack of skills and knowledge. Nobody's fault, but they do exist, and we have to address them. And of course, there are other problems that you have been detecting and that are probably also valid in other areas and that we have to look into. But it has also shown, and I think that gives me particular pride, is that the cultural and creative sector is not only thirsty and willing to address those challenges, but that you're already on your way doing it. You're already on the train, and let's hope that others will be able also to take that train, and we will do so by allowing a further train on the platform very soon, and loads of trains in the future on which everybody can embark by making this a future action under Creative Europe. So thanks very much to all of you, in particular, of course, the team that has done this, the organizations that were responsible. Without you and your enthusiasm, probably we wouldn't be here. And I think all of those that are here will thank you very much for this also, like we do. Thanks a lot.
Much thanks to you, Barbara. In particular, from all of us, for your dedication towards Perform Europe during these last 18 months, and yes, many more years in preparation before, as was mentioned. But you have been a wonderful counterpart for us to have at the Commission in this whole roller coaster experiment of the last 18 months, and it's been invaluable. It's now time to hear from the artists, the producers and the presenters, who are the core and purpose of Perform Europe. We have invited 3 professionals representing the 19 partnerships to tell us about what we are doing now. And to lead this panel, Perform Europe partner Stefan Segreo-Agiel of Circostrata will come to the stage and introduce his professionals.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. It doesn't? It does? It does. Hi, everyone. My name is Stefan. I represent Circostrata Network. I am a white man with Mediterranean traits. I just turned 41. Thank you. Short brown hair, long black beard, wearing a fantastic mustard shirt. I have the very crucial task today, in less than 30 minutes, to give you a glimpse into 3 different projects out of the 19 projects that Perform Europe is supporting. To do so, I'm joined by Kama Sigumfeld from Helsingør Theatre based in Denmark. Hi, Kama.
Hi.
Representing the project Step by Step, Wheel by Wheel. I am also joined by Madhu Mitanandi from Oyun, based in Germany. Hi, Madhu.
Hello.
Representing the project Embodied Temporalities, Tracing the Memories Our Bodies Hold. And last but not least, I am joined by Ivona Kreutzmanova.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Ivona. From Tanec Praha in Czech Republic. Representing the project Words by Clarice Lima and Collective. So, time is short, let me jump right into it. I'm going to start with you, Kama. Could you please introduce yourself and also tell us about the project?
Yes, hello. I work as an administrator at Helsingør Theatre, and I'm also involved in all our international projects. We are presenting organization. We're in Helsingør, north of Copenhagen, very close to Sweden, and we present theater performances for adults year-round. We do a lot of presentation of performances for children, and we run a big street theater festival every year in the end of July. It happens both in Helsingør and in Helsingborg, Sweden.
Tell us about the project.
The project, Step by Step, Wheel by Wheel, was about touring the performance Habra Kepones Kachas, in short HQPC, by the Spanish group Proyecto Colectivo, run by artistic director Melis Arabit. The project is a duo. One of the performers is in a wheelchair. You saw it actually on the screens before. And we simply made a kind of normal tour, you could say, for this piece. The thing being that a piece like this tours very little. And this is because it's more demanding to tour a piece where you have several people in wheelchairs. So it's a different process you have to go through. It's really all the normal things that you have to plan for a tour. You have to plan the traveling, the accommodation, you have to find rehearsal spaces and backstage areas and all these things. But this is just different when you are dealing with wheelchairs. So we managed to create a great tour for the performance. It went to us in Denmark, and went to Sweden, a bit north of us, and it went to Montpellier also. And the performance was performed in Denmark. It was performed both in the streets and inside in a school, and also in Sweden on streets. So we found this a big achievement, and the company was very happy with this tour.
Are there any impacts that you can already share?
I mean, for us, the really important thing is just, and it's big, we've gone so much aware of how important it is to present different bodies on the stage, on the street. I think, I mean, what we already did was that some audiences experienced something they had never done before. So this is definitely an impact, yes.
And you told me before when we were preparing that you had a little quote that you wanted to read about the Proyecto Colectivo.
Yes, I mean, from the artist's side, I have something from them. So what they're writing is, accessibility of all the projects for all audiences should be considered in all budgets and the application process for all projects selected. The question is, the projects are inclusive for who? Audio description, sign language, interpreter, closed caption should not be an afterthought, but at the core of an application for Perform Europe from now. The problem is, in many countries in Europe, there is no funding opportunity for dance companies to make your work accessible. It's a shame, and the responsibility goes to a small collective like ours to work on it when they can, while it should be programmers and funders that have that in mind and consider it while funding a project. Access is not an effort, it's a right, both for performance and audiences. There's still a lack of funding for that, and as a consequence, a lot of audiences and disabled performers are still excluded from enjoying cultural events. So,
thank you. Food for thought. Where can we see the upcoming performance coming up?
Well, HQPC performance, they already finished their tour, but I should mention that we were also partners in another very interesting project called Slow Mo. It has a really long title, but basically it was connecting Eco-Village Clojordan, which is in Ireland, to continental Europe via land, sea, and dance. So these young performers, they traveled for 25 days on trains and boats to come from Ireland to Cyprus, back to Denmark. They performed in Denmark, and this was last Thursday. And they performed in Sweden on Saturday, and now they are heading for their last performance in Bristol in the UK.
Great.
So,
could you tell us a little bit more about Slow Mo?
Yeah, I mean, what they did is they tried to connect their performance to their destination. So they were asking people from Helsingør and Halmstad, the other location, that had some connections to the places they were passing through, to deliver them to them, and they created their performance from that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Karma.
Thank you.
Moving on to the second project. Madhu, could you please introduce yourself and tell us about the project that you're representing today?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you here. I'm Madhumita Nandi, Indian. And I'm an artist and a researcher, deeply interested in memory culture and re-examining and reforming of how collective memories are formed. And my work centers around investigating and subverting the impact of colonial archival practices on contemporary society, with a special focus on intangible heritage and ephemeral art. And I have been working as an artistic co-director of Oyun, a cultural institution and a community space as well, out of Berlin. Where we develop socio-cultural projects based on queer feminist, neurodiverse, and class-critical perspectives, with the aim of creating an intersectional platform of decentralized knowledge. And this is where we started Embodied Temporalities 2 years back, at the onset of the pandemic.
Right.
Yeah, like when you're looking at like temporality of like treating the body as a memory and trying to understand the past, present, and also the future at the same time. And when you try to do that at the onset of pandemic, it added another layer.
Tell us about the process then of this project.
So, as I said, just to explain a little bit about the project first, like treating the body as memory and understanding the body as a site of oppression. This project kind of explores embodied memories and identities and belonging through diasporic and queer feminist perspectives. And it offers a very community-centered approach as a framework for the participants to voice their experiences of ancestry, rituals, trauma, loss, death, mourning, you know, and to find a collective way of healing practices. And to go back at thinking about performance and like looking at performative nature of social identities that we live, all of us are living in, like either gendered or classed or raced, and looking at that and bringing communities and cultural practitioners together through workshops and interventions and performances, and trying to create like a very safe space, ensuring that there is a balance of the knowledge production with the communities, involving the communities' interests as well as their perspectives. Yes, the process is long, if I want to. And we are still, I think, thinking, and we just finished the last thing in Greece, where we worked with refugees and asylum seekers, and I think I'm still processing how we can ensure the longevity of these processes. When we go to certain locations, we are kind of working with them for a stipulated period of time, but we are also opening up doors for new things to happen. But how do we ensure that we kind of still continue the process and suiting everybody's needs? So I think there are a lot of questions that have come up during the processes, and I'm still processing that.
And what other challenges did you face?
Challenges, I think, time. Looking at temporalities, yes, I think time has been a challenge because with this project, it's such a process-driven project rather than an output-driven project. So we want to learn about the communities, about the location, about what are the like structural challenges that each location that we are dealing with, you know, and that was really, really challenging to do it in such a short time. Like we got like almost a month or two for each location to understand all of it, and probably for the last one we had more time to prepare, but exactly because we were not ready to go with an output to a community. We wanted to design the structure depending and understanding what the community needs first. And I think for that time is really important.
And how did you find your partners then?
Oh, okay. Through Perform Europe. Yeah, so I mean, like, I think we had like a month to meet all the partners that's possible and connect and like talk to them and figure out what our intentions, how our values, how our ethics match, and how we can like build something together. So yes, I think a little bit more time with that would be also very helpful.
We heard you, not only now, before also. Yes, thank you. And do you think that you were mentioning the question of sustainability of not only the context, but also the relationship with the partners? Are you hopeful that in the future you may be able to, you know, to maintain this relationship and to work again with them on similar projects?
Absolutely. I think with the last one also, I'm really like, while we were finishing the project, we were figuring how do we continue this, because when just taking an example of like the participants, when they come and tell you, oh my God, these are the best days of my life, and then we are just leaving this door for them to kind of practice all these healing practices by themselves. How can we continue this with them? How do we continue a relationship with them? And yes, we would really like to figure out how do we do that.
Could you elaborate on healing? Because you've been mentioning this word quite a few times. Mm-hmm. How does it connect with the performative aspect of the project or the process?
Right. So I think healing comes here. Then I have to speak about also what are we healing from. See, voices of like marginalized communities and underrepresented communities and the people of color in Europe has been oppressed and suppressed for over a long time through the destructive logics of the settler colonial state, white supremacy, and capitalistic exploitation. And this project aims to connect the communities by sharing this vulnerability and the displacement and the expressions of displacement and identity and heritage of the people of color in Europe. And this is kind of done through these practices of like where we can bring them together and understand how do we manage to kind of deal with this, navigate ourselves in this different multiple levels of structural inequalities. So the healing is from a lot of things among all of that.
Any learnings that you would be able to share?
Any learnings? Well, I think this project started in Berlin, in Germany, and thanks to Perform Europe, we could take it to different places in Birmingham and Czech Republic and Greece. And we all realized that the narratives, the colonial narratives, are still very much present in every locations, and also the different structural problems that we have to deal with. So it is definitely really important to kind of recreate these spaces to kind of like create an imaginative resistance that we really require at this moment to build a very cohesive and an inclusive society.
Great. Is there something you would do differently?
I would definitely would like to, if we had to repeat this like that. Okay, so I think I would like to work with bring together the partners in the beginning with each other through workshops and interventions so that they all understand the concept of the project, but they also understand each other, because we are not doing just one, like for us, it was not just doing like, okay, we take the project and go here, but it's also understanding the trajectory of the project and how it can benefit all the communities, and also the sharing between the partners and not like separate. So yeah, I would have definitely preferred to do the anti-racism workshops that we had applied for, but we didn't get the funding for that.
Last questions. You mentioned the word communities.
Yes.
Could you elaborate on communities? Who are they?
The communities I would we focus on are the people of color, the indigenous communities, the bisexual and the queer communities, and also definitely the marginalized communities in different contexts. Marginalization on bodies and on the level of bodies could come on many different levels. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Madhu. Thank you. Moving on to the third partnership project, Ivona, can I ask you please to introduce yourself and also to talk about the project?
Yes, hello. My name is Ivona Kreutzmanova, and I just come, I think I am making this geographical balance here because I come from the Czech Republic and city of Prague, and I funded Tanec Praha in 1991 as one of the first NGOs in our country, totally dedicated to contemporary dance. I'm founder and director of Tanec Praha, and I'm also president of the Czech section of ITI in Czech Republic. What I'm doing and presenting here is quite interesting because we were lucky as Tanec Praha. We are involved in two projects which are supported by Perform Europe. One of them is of my very good friends here, Roberto and Elisabetta from Aerowaves, new directors, congratulations. Aerowaves was successful with the project which is called Springback Ringside, and it was the project we started during COVID time to record on very special camera, 180 degrees, some works from Aerowaves platform, and now we have chance in our part of Europe, especially Eastern Europe, to present it to the audience, thanks to Perform Europe. So this is one of the projects. The other one is even more crazy, and it's called Woods. Woods means that we plant the trees on squares and streets of the cities because we miss the trees there. And it's a very strong ecological concept by Clarice Lima from Brazil. And it's also funny for me that this project started when we had encounter of EDN, European Dance House Network, in Sao Paulo. And I met Clarice there, and I was so impressed how she is thinking about this concept. She was starting that time on it, and they are making these fantastic skirts from upcycling materials, and they are made in favelas and helping these people also to be involved. And then they bring it to Europe, and we made their tour starting in Vilnius in the moment when the war started. So bringing Ukrainians in the project as well, not only local communities. And then going to Stockholm, and then crazy 12 performances in the Czech Republic in 4 different cities like Brno, Ostrava, Pilsen, and finally Prague, which happened yesterday. And it will finish in Bristol also. And there will be the live stream of the film which we created with, in Vilnius. And it will be on 17th of June. So you can follow the website of Perform Europe and you can see the Woods in Bristol with the live stream.
Fantastic. Could you tell us a little bit more about your partners? How did you find them? How are you working with them? Who are they?
So basically this project was selected by another very important network of 12 European festivals of dance, which is called Big Pulse Dance Alliance. I missed the word dance in this. And we were having an open call, and there were about more than 200 projects applying, and we choose together Woods as something we want really to bring to Europe. It's not only Brazilian project, there are Portuguese and Slovenian artists involved in it. And so the partnership was done through Berlin, the Tanz im August, with Vilnius, which is also partner of Big Pulse. But then, thanks to Perform Europe, we received the questions from Stockholm and Bristol if they can join the project. So I was very happy that we can make this tour May, June, and it's more than 5 weeks and many, many performances over Europe.
Could you describe the reaction of the audience to this performance?
Well, many people are really surprised. What does it mean? These people upside down. Then they read the story, then they start to love it, then they make a lot of photos, then they start to discuss. There are people also coming and telling, can we get it in our city? We really love that. So it's very interesting. Mainly the people are really, really nicely surprised, and they really want to hear more about what is the concept. And even the children, they want to touch and see if the bodies will fall down or what will happen. So it's really great.
So this is clearly an impact. Did you see many shifts in consciousness? Did you see any further action following this project? I know it's soon already, but what can you imagine for the future of this project? Can you see germinating out of these performances?
Well, for example, in Prague, as a touristic city, there were people immediately asking for contacts and inviting this performance. So it was really interesting. And for sure, also other partners of Big Pulse Dance Alliance are ready to present it in upcoming years or in their festivals in other time, because now the Perform Europe was limited till the end of June. Yeah.
And what have you learned yourself in the process?
Well, sometimes you just have very much ambitious and then you overload your team. So I felt like really that it was a little bit too much, because we are organizing Tanec Praha Festival for the whole month of June in Prague and 23 other cities and municipalities. And at the same time, we are coordinating Woods, which is quite heavy. Sorry to my team.
Apologies. And what was the easiest part of this project?
Well, that was bringing Ukrainian dance artists to 6 of performances in Pilsen and in Prague, and they were so excited and so happy to be in, because they never heard about conceptual work like that, and now we are also bringing them to other projects and making Focus Ukraine. So I'm very happy that this way we can help and let them also forget a little bit about the trauma situation they have.
And what pieces of advice would you give to someone who would like to embark in such a journey?
Be careful how big project you are doing.
Still, it's worth it, right? Seems like it. Thank you so much, Ivona. I have a last question for the three of you. It's the same question. Whoever wants to pick it first, please go ahead. The question is the following. What would you wish yourself for the project that you're representing and for Perform Europe in the future? Who wants to take this question first? Kama, you're the brave one.
Well, I'm very happy to hear that there is a second edition, and what we have been thinking about is that
the future
is that some afterlife of we did this, it was great, what now? You know, to maybe have this somehow in the consideration. And the other thing is, we were talking about who are all the other projects. Oh, there is a website, you can look at it. There's a lot of stuff there, and we're busy. That, you know, to have connecting with the other projects on the way in the process might have been nice, and we wouldn't have minded some matchmaking, you know, from those who knew the projects better, maybe said, I think you two, you four have something in common, so that could be a way to go in the next edition.
Well, there's going to be a lot of networking going on tonight, I hope.
Yes.
Madhu, Ivona, who wants to?
I think I agree to your points, very relevant, and for me also with this project specifically, I would like to continue working with more communities in Europe, and also grassroots organizations that are like directly working with the communities. And with Perform Europe, I have to first say it has been really great working with Perform Europe team, because they have been really accessible and approachable, and also they have been listening to all the problems that could happen during the process, because it's very natural to have problems in a process. So thank you for that, and for future I wish that yes, as you said, that we kind of get some more time and to know the partners, and as well as get hopefully the next time the implementation time is also longer rather than trying to put together in a shorter time. Yeah.
Thank you. I extend a thank you to the Perform Europe team who are in the back. Ivona.
Well, for me, I'm really excited to work on so many participative projects and to bring different communities in it, and to see how you can also work together with professionals and amateurs, with Czechs and Ukrainians, and it works so well and creates for everyone such a great atmosphere and opportunities. And for future, I wish we continue to support, Ukrainians, because if every one of us is doing what I am doing, like taking care about 10 dancers, then you can really manage to do something. And they need it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivona. Thank you, Madhu. Thank you, Kama. A big round of applause, please, for our panelists.
Thanks to all 4 of you. It was heartwarming to listen to your stories and in particularly your will to continue. And all of you here, please note that we have representatives of all the 19 partnerships, so do hang around after the event and mingle and hear about their experience. And for all of you who are watching us on the live stream, please go to performeurope.eu and watch the interviews and stories and the videos and all the things that are available and hear about the wonderful experience. Although very short, we all know that's far too short, but there's been wonderful experiences going on. But now it's time to hear about the future. How we, the Perform Europe partners, see the future. How we think Perform Europe should be shaped in the years to come. And I invite to the stage my colleagues, Elena Polvitseva, Project Manager of Perform Europe, and Joris Jansen, our expert from ED Consult.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elena. I'm a white, physically abled, rather young woman. And together with Joris, we will present you our main learning points and also how Perform Europe sees the future of sustainable and inclusive touring of performing arts in Europe. As you might have imagined, we have been learning a lot at Perform Europe at an unprecedented pace. And today we would like to share with you how we think the performing arts sector in the future should embed sustainable and inclusive practices in their working models, and also how funders and policymakers should support and stimulate such practices and models. So, how do we see the future? Or maybe before, how did we come up with this vision? What helped us to shape that vision? We have gone through several steps of knowledge generation. So, as Aude already mentioned, in the beginning we had a very extensive research phase. Then we also proactively learned from our jury, who had access to the wonderful material of the applications through which they learned about the main trends of inclusivity and sustainability approaches in the sector. We have learned also from the 19 selected partnerships, of course, through interviewing them, surveying them, and analyzing their activity reports. We have been very lucky to be surrounded by very knowledgeable, professional and supportive advisory group members who are also today, some of them here in the audience, and also our policy experts that helped the process. And of course, we have been having continuous, very intense discussions, brainstorms in the Performing Arts Consortium. And here we go. You see on the screens 8 elements, 8 aspects of Perform Europe's vision for the future. And I give the word to yours.
Okay. Briefly, I'll first introduce myself. I'm Joris, I'm a white man, 47. I have curly brown hair, some glasses, dressed in blue. And indeed, I will talk first about our approach to sustainability. Sustainability, of course, being a central concept for Perform Europe. First, it's important to explain a bit how we conceptualized sustainability, how we defined it. We defined sustainable practices as practices, quite evidently, which can be sustained over a longer period of time. And also in our sector, we see a lot of practices that are not sustainable. So in that sense, it is not about maintaining the status quo. It's really about a shift towards a more sustainable situation. So that's one element. Also, secondly, important to note, it's not only about ecological sustainability, it is about sustainability in many ways, many forms, many values. We work with a 5-value framework, the ecological, but also artistic sustainability, the social, the human, and also the economical. And already in the panel we saw that those elements always interact in concrete projects on the floor, so that is quite clear. And this is really the Perform Europe framework. What did we learn? Indeed, as it's also been demonstrated in the panel, throughout the process we saw that a shared vision emerged on these values, these diverse values. So that's important. We related them to concrete practices on the floor, and we also developed and saw that there are shared needs and a shared vision throughout the broad geographic context that we're talking about. Time and space also being important conditions for that. So that's important, a shared vision, shared needs. But also, as it also has been demonstrated, sometimes these values conflict with each other. Time and space are rare. And indeed, when you need to do this balancing exercise, sometimes priorities can differ. We also encountered that in that broad space that we see, and Elena will continue to talk more about it in just a second. So, but for the future, it's important indeed that we are going to continue this holistic approach, this systemic approach, since all these issues are interact with each other. And indeed, as the panel has already demonstrated, as you can see online, we need experiments that tackle these different issues in an inspiring way, and we can learn a lot from them, and this will help us to imagine this new, more sustainable future and also contribute to it. So that's important points, Elena.
So the next element is ecological practices. As Joris said, ecological practices, ecological transformation has been an important, not the only one, but an important element of our understanding of sustainability. Through the Perform Europe process, we have realized that in all 41 countries that were in focus of Perform Europe, there is a lot of motivation and interest in the performing arts sector to adopt greener practices to their work. At the same time, our research also showed that there are only very few funding schemes in these 41 countries that actually focus on ecological touring or ecological production. And there are almost no schemes which do it on a sustainable, let's say, continuous basis. So what we also learned, which is not a groundbreaking discovery, that ecological practices are very expensive, they are much more time-consuming, and they also put additional pressures on physical capacities and work-life balance of artists and performers. Just to give you an example, if you're a performer, a circus performer, for instance, it will require some additional time to rest if you have to cycle all your tour, or if you have to take a car and spend several hours in it. What we also learned, and that's about this red thread tension that we have been observing throughout the Perform Europe journey, there is this tension between the privilege to the privilege of the ability to adopt green practices on one hand, or maybe even stop touring, and on the other hand, the actual prioritization of breaking out through isolation and actually gaining visibility, connecting across borders, etc. This is linked a lot also to other type of inequalities, and we can see that there is also a big knowledge gap about how actually to do things in a greener way. There are a lot of professionals who would like to do it, but to do it in a continuous, sustainable way, this is also requires additional skills. And what we have seen also analyzing some of the 19 projects is that the most meaningful way to adopt ecological practices is about embedding them, or basically stemming from your value of your projects, from the core idea of your project. When ecological practices become nice extras, or some topping, or some forced attempts to tick some boxes of the funder, they're more complicated to implement, because there might be some issues with time and money along the way, and then those practices, if they are not part of the artistic DNA, they very quickly fall apart. So, how we see the future? We think that funders should definitely support green production, green mobility. But if they want to support greening, they should also understand that you can't demand greening at the same time expect huge, impressive, fastly implemented, massive projects, because greening and ecological practices is a lot about meaningful connections, respecting boundaries, and doing something actually within a longer period of time. What we also think is very important is that we need to address those inequalities to adopt greening. And this should happen, of course, through funding schemes. Basically, the jury should be aware that different countries have different particularities, but also the whole call should be designed in a way that it's embracing the diversity of contexts. But also the performing arts sector itself should understand that if they want to continue working across borders and to be ecological, they should understand that some countries can adopt ecological practices faster than the others. So there should be some solidarity put in place. And here we go next.
Okay, next point, geographical imbalances. We already talked a little bit before. We also saw some slides in the intro presentation. Indeed, we've learned it's in the mapping research. We have been able to really illustrate also some of these imbalances in international touring flows. This was not evident because you might know there is indeed a big lack of good, robust, solid data to really map this. We set up an experiment scraping social media data, so this was quite experimental. We need better data in the future, but still it was a first really illustration of these imbalances, so that was an interesting success. Also, we saw that indeed we mapped support schemes, as Ausa demonstrated, and of course the disturbing insight is that there's a clear correlation between countries and regions having access to the international market, and also in relation to the availability and the occurrence of sustainable support. So, a big issue, of course, these asymmetries, and it relates to the fact that some artists and producers from countries with better, more sustainable support schemes do have more opportunities on this international market. And this is really, of course, also for the future, a key issue to engage with. Another insight from the whole process, it's important to stress and to map out that these inequalities in the touring and presentation, that they are related also to broader inequalities in supporting the performing arts. It's also related to access to arts education. It's related to access to means and resources for network development, prospection and scouting. So it's important also to take that into account when thinking about future initiatives. And how do we see the future then? Indeed, first point, it's necessary to deepen and to strengthen the research. I already mentioned the point concerning a data strategy, but also, of course, other insights should be deepened and strengthened. How touring relates to these broader policy issues, for instance. But second, of course, main point to be made here, certainly for funding schemes on EU level, it's, of course, essential to engage with these geographical imbalances, with these asymmetries activities. And this should be done via a multifaceted strategy, as we say here. It's important not only to look at a presentation itself, not only about communication of the policy possibilities and the funding possibilities, but also to look deeper, the underlying issues, factors, and also take these into account when addressing these imbalances. So this is an important point to make on in this respect, Elena.
So the next aspect is diversity and inclusivity. Those two have been key values of Perform Europe. So we try to mainstream them throughout the whole process. We also have undertaken a very massive promotion campaign in order to reach different underrepresented communities which are structurally, let's say, excluded from different funding opportunities, especially on a cross-border level. So we had a network of expert organizations in all the 41 countries to promote our open calls in their respective communities. At the same time, what we have also learned is that there is a very big lack of data, and it's quite hard and challenging to operate within a big, let's say, problem when you don't have any knowledge about how big the problem is and what should be the priority. So there's basically just no approximate study that would give us indication how different communities are represented and situated in the 41 countries that were in focus of our study. And that we also realize that even if we don't have that knowledge, there's some strategies should be adopted in any funding scheme. So we learned that some actions targeting specific groups are essential, let's say affirmative actions. So how we see the future, we think that a wide-scale research is really needed in order to collect data and to understand the scale of the problem and to define our priorities in this regard. And at the same time, in the meantime, when we don't have that research, we should try to implement affirmative actions, basically active policies that give opportunities to communities that are structurally discriminated. And such affirmative actions are especially interesting, especially needed for the bigger programs that are structured, that are stable, that are continuous. And we also think that every funding scheme should adopt a multi-level and comprehensive strategy to inclusivity. And here we are talking about every step, starting from making the teams more diverse, adopting practice of consulting diverse experts about the open call. It's about having a special budget for access and inclusivity and promoting this kind of budget. It's about continuing what we have done, basically having ambassadors across Europe, let's say, who can promote the call, but doing it with a special budget as well, so that they can be paid for doing these efforts. And it's a lot about briefing the jury and adopting the right selection methodology so that there is more underrepresented players included.
Okay, next point, the different disciplines within the performing arts. You all know by now, performing arts has been targeting all disciplines within the performing arts equally. Theater, dance, circus, street arts, all performing arts, all live arts, except music, basically. And indeed, throughout the process, we have learned a lot about how these different disciplines and sectors engage on the international level. Maybe some points from the mapping. We saw, for instance, that theater might be less oriented on the international market than, for instance, contemporary dance or circus. There might be some factors that can explain this. The language barrier, for instance, that is more prominent for theater, but also we saw the internal size of the internal market for performing arts, for these performing arts disciplines, also play a role. You have a number of European countries with a large theater tradition, with a lot of opportunities to play in the national markets, let's say that, like that. Companies operating there, they often feel less the need to internationalize their approach in order to have a sustainable organization. This is less the case, for instance, in contemporary dance or circus, where you really need to internationalize in order to have a sustainable career, a sustainable organization. Just as an example of differences between the sectors and the disciplines. Also importantly, the level of support can differ. There are still some countries where theater is main or only sector that is officially acknowledged. Support for contemporary dance or circus seems to be less, well, there are places where this is less developed, let's say. So indeed, also support opportunities can differ from country to country and region to region. So this is important to acknowledge. At the same time, we see these differences between these sectors and disciplines. On the other hand, we saw also a trend towards a more interdisciplinary approach. You saw the projects. Indeed, a lot of innovation from the bottom up tends to ignore the categories between the disciplines and really adopt new approaches where these categories become less relevant. So, to take a pace for the future, how do we see the future? On the one hand, of course, it's important to recognize these differences between the disciplines and also, indeed, counteract some of the lacks in support. On the second hand, it's also important to keep this open framework because indeed that will help the innovation towards more sustainability. Yes.
The next topic is digitalization. That has been our favorite topic at Perform Europe. Perform Europe was born in the middle of the pandemic when our lives have migrated to the internet almost entirely, and live arts have always been already experimenting with digital technologies, but during the pandemic, as we all know, it went even faster. At Perform Europe, we tried to be very mindful and careful how we define digital in the performing arts and the live arts. So we try to distinguish between digital theater, digital performance, digital performing arts, and basically live arts, which is still cherishing the physical touch with the audience, but digitalizing different parts of its processes, such as broadcasting, live streaming, recording, archiving, ticketing, and many other processes. So, and the latter, if it's stimulated by the funder, should really be very clearly attached to certain goals, because digitalization itself shouldn't be a goal. It should be a part, it should be a tool of achieving some bigger mission or bigger strategy. So we have also, at Perform Europe, experimented with digital networking, digital matchmaking. So as some of you might know, we have developed a pilot digital platform for presenters and producers to discover each other's offer, to network, to create projects together. So this has been interesting, and we have seen that this has both advantages and opportunities, but also some risks. So digital networking is, of course, very interesting in terms of giving access to visibility to some of those players which would otherwise have not have this access, just because they're not part of transnational networks, or because they are not able to come to international festivals, or because they're simply not invited because they're not known. So such digital platforms are definitely very important in terms of giving this access to visibility. But on the other hand, if these tools are not mindful of the existing inequalities and existing dynamics in the performing arts sector, the relations between artists and the competition that exists between artists and producers, but also imbalances of decision-making power between presenters and producers, if all this is not being taken into account, such platforms can only aggravate the situation. So basically, how we see the future, and if continuing about the digital platform, such tools should be, let's say, first of all, not the main tools. There should be still physical networking, definitely. But secondly, they should support a bigger strategy, which is not about digital again. It should be about equalizing, creating level playing fields, about bridging some gaps that exist and so on. So they should not make things worse, basically. And also what we need, before we rush into using digital technologies because they are supposedly greener, let's say we do a lot of conferences online because obviously it's too harmful for the environment to travel. Before we do all that with certainty that we are doing the right thing, we do need more studies, more research about the actual digital carbon footprints. And as I already said, the last point of our vision of the future is that funders, when they stimulate digitalization, they should be very clear about the target groups. Is it for the digital artistic practices, or is it about digitalization of live art practices? And they should also be very clear about the goals of digitalization.
Okay, next point. Last but one of the 8 key topics: economic sustainability, financial resources, money basically, of course, a huge topic in this respect, and hugely debated throughout the whole process. What have we learned? First, that money is an issue, but it is not the goal. International touring does not make money, it costs money basically, and the benefits, as have been demonstrated quite extensively, they are elsewhere in the exchange between the artists and the communities. That's the essence. However, to get to these benefits, investments are needed, and lack of resources indeed is the main obstacle for both presenters and producers, as it has been shown in the sectoral survey that we did. Also the availability or the lack of resources, financial resources, largely explain who is able to engage on the international market and who's not. So this is clearly an issue that needs to be addressed. We already said it, and it needs to be stressed even more. But there's also another major important point with regards to economic sustainability, and of course that has to do with the socio-economic position of artists and all performing arts professionals, everybody in the field. Fair practice, fair pay, fair remuneration, a big topic, and indeed a shared value once more throughout the huge space that we have covered with Perform Europe. Everybody thinks it's essential. At the same time, on the floor, it can lead to difficult situation because often standards, norms, conventions, procedures are lacking. Certainly on the EU level, which is quite broad, of course, Creative Europe region even broader. But even in most countries on the national level, these standards are lacking. So that is one important takeaway, of course, with regards to how we see the future. Fair practice, hugely important, should be a building block, an essential cornerstone of all performing arts funding programs. There should be a broad understanding of fair practice, not only remuneration, but also shared risk, transparencies of contracts, many more things. This should all be taken into account, and funding schemes should provide incentives to stimulate the thinking and reflection about it, to make it into practice, and also funding schemes should be self-reflective, not to promote unfair practices, for instance, by acknowledging projects with too little financial resources to pay everybody involved in a decent way. So these are some takeaways with regards to economic sustainability.
And the final aspect that we would like to talk about is about skills, about capacity building and learning. So what we learned at Perform Europe is that innovation, let's say sustainable innovation that can actually last and can bring something meaningful, is not about trying and failing and then again trying something else and failing. It's a lot about actually adapting your skills to new realities, learning new methodology that you can reapply in different contexts. It's basically about capacity building. And there is a big gap of knowledge in the performing arts sector. That's knowledge and skills are the two main gaps, that's two of the 10 main gaps that were identified in our research. So basically, performing arts sector does not entirely know how to work with communities in a slow way, how to adopt greener practices, and there is of course knowledge about this in some parts of the sector, in some parts of Europe, but it's not spread equally, let's say like this. And of course, acknowledging this gap, we should also acknowledge the diversity of the needs in terms of capacity building. It's not that we can just offer one full program of knowledge to everyone. Of course, we need to be nuanced about the diversity of the needs. And if we go to our vision of the future, we actually think that every funder that wants to support an innovative project, let's say, no matter what innovative means, should allow applicants and beneficiaries to include capacity building budget in their projects. So basically learning activities which don't necessarily result immediately in something, but are linked to the project, of course. There should be a certain percentage of the budget allowed for these kind of activities, which then should, of course, naturally be ingrained in the whole project. And the applicants should be able to define themselves what exactly they need to learn for this specific project. Then also we at Perform Europe stimulated exchange of knowledge, because this knowledge does exist, of course. So it has been interesting to see how partners from different parts of Europe, from different parts of the sector have been sharing that knowledge. But what is even more interesting that we saw was not about this transactional exchange of knowledge, but generation of new knowledge. And this has been possible thanks to this systemic approach that you presented in the beginning, when you basically stimulate experts on accessibility and inclusivity, come together with experts on digitalization and experts on greening, and together coming up with new knowledge, with new methodology that can approach sustainability in a wider, more comprehensive way.
Okay, that's our story. To conclude, 8 key topics which we learned a lot about, and it's not only the consortium, the organization, the researchers, the team, but it's all of us. It's been a whole process with the research and also the experiences on the field. All this has been coming together now, and if you want to learn more about it, you can go to the Perform Europe website and download the main research paper document publication online. It's online since today. So there you can read more about the learnings and also some ideas for the future, the shared vision for more sustainable, balanced and inclusive touring. Thank you for your attention.
Wow. Thank you for this roller coaster ride through the lessons and learnings and recommendations of Perform Europe. It's not easy to do it, but these two have been doing it all alone, and I think I congratulate you on behalf of all of us. It's a lot of work that has been done through this 18 months, and a lot of learnings which we humbly want to share with you as much as possible. But I am quite sure that after this thought-provoking duet of Elena and Joris, there are some questions in the room. And we do have a few minutes for you to bombard us, all of us here and anybody else that has been asking. And I already see a hand raised over there. Please stand up and introduce yourself, because we have cameramen that are going to take you from the front so you can be seen by the live stream audiences as well. Mic not working? No.
I work for artists and also for small residencies and I'm quite attached to the artistic world. I was wondering, how would you describe a sustainable funding scheme for this?
Yeah, maybe I can.
Joris, how do you describe a sustainable funding scheme? What is a sustainable funding scheme?
Well, I can explain a bit how we dealt with this question throughout the process, because indeed we showed this line where we not only counted the number, the occurrence of support schemes, but we also had an assessment, and of course sustainability is important in our conception. So how did we conceptualize sustainability in relation to support schemes? Of course, also here, not only solely in terms of ecological sustainability. Elena told already that if you look at that, you will not see many sustainable funding schemes. But we had a number of parameters which were important to have really a long-term perspective for artists and for presenters. For instance, the type of funding schemes, it can be about finances, but there are also other forms of support, supporting network, relationship, development, etc. So it's also about a combination of these different instruments. It's also about access. Who has access to these resources? Is it going to be the presenters or the producers or everybody in the ecosystem? So a balanced access to everybody in the field is important, to the different disciplines. So these are a number of elements to be taken into account. Also, are you going to focus only on exporting your artists to wave the flags, or will you also invent in import and different types of exchange and development? So these are elements that we took into account when really assessing the funding schemes and the different kinds of sustainability. Also in the transparency of the procedures, etc. So these are, well, elements that we took into along when we looked at these schemes, and it might also be important for the future. If there are people in the room who want to improve their practice, you can have a checklist of sustainability indicators for your funding schemes.
Thank you. We have a question over there.
Hi, I am Bebe de Soares. I was very lucky also to be in two touring schemes, but also I'm here with my hat of Vice President of ACITEJ, which is one of the advisors, here together with Luis Valente. And I would like to tell about the wish I had, we all had, that the presenters, the network of presenters that were formed in each one of these schemes, that for me, that's the biggest legacy of the Perform Europe. I understand when the artist has then his own network, like for us, Dansema, for instance, that now they have performed in all these places, and of course, these are seeds for the future, for future collaborations and all this. But to me, the Perform Europe formed these networks of presenters, and this is the sustainable for all artists that then will come in the future. And yes, so this is, I wish we could have met as presenters. In both schemes this was cut from the budget, so next time I really would like, I think this is very important.
Thank you, Pepe. Thank you very much. And strengthening that relationship and enabling presenters as well as artists and producers to have more long-term networking engagement is one of the recommendations that we are sending over to the European Commission. Do we have another? Elke?
Yes, Elke Kaschel from the Goethe Institute. First of all, congratulations. It's fantastic what you've done during those 18 months, and thank you so much for sharing these highly valuable insights with us. And this is exactly my question. You said you will kind of spread it, and I think this is terrific, because I think these are issues we are all involved in the culture field are thinking about, and it's so good to pool our thoughts and not all reinvent the wheel, but really share the insights. So what are your channels of sharing this with the sector and more people? I mean, this is a good way of sharing, but which other channels do you have in mind of making this available?
Well, we have now shared the research. It's online for anybody to download and read. We are sending our policy recommendations to the European Commission as we speak. As soon as we get the green light, we will also put those online. And we are starting to talk about the importance of sharing it as much, both in the digital realm, but also in the physical space in the months and years to come. Because I think, you can do so much by giving people access to your reading online and reading it by yourself. But I think moments like we are having today are so important. So we have already started talking about the importance of doing so. But thank you for the reminder. There's a question over there. How many minutes do we have, Anna? 8 minutes? Okay, good.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for this really inspiring day. My name is Ulla Havinga. I'm part of United Cowboys.
Maybe stand up so the people can better hear you.
Hello. My name is Ulla Havinga. I'm part of United Cowboys, which was also one of the presenters in Perform Europe. But actually my question comes from a different direction, but it does tap into what you just said. I'm also coordinating an arts master program for Fontys Arts University, and this is this question comes from that angle. So if you talk about sustainability, if you talk about greening, fair practices, the future, I'm immediately triggered to think about the next generation, about higher arts education. So I was wondering, did this ever occur to you to bring all this research to kind of circulate it, embed it into higher arts education? Because I think there's also where the future lies. There's where we have to communicate and embed findings and research for generations to come.
A brilliant idea, Lena.
Which is already in our 55-page policy recommendations, if you have read them attentively. Basically, our policy recommendations report, which we are, as Auze said, going to send to the European Commission, has these 8 chapters. That's what we presented today, and each of them has recommendations, and I think only almost every one of them has its recommendation to address that topic through the arts education and to bring this knowledge anyhow, and to create more sensibilization about digitalization, ecological practices, and so on and so forth, and also about the geographic imbalances, which is also something quite unique as a piece of knowledge that's Perform Europe produced. So it's a very fair point, and it is indeed mainstreamed in the recommendations to the European Commission.
Can I add a reflection to that?
Please.
Yeah? I think it's really a hugely important point in that sense. If you try to conceive, we talk about the transition and the transformation of the sector, what you really need in order to do that, to make it happen. And what we have done now within Perform Europe is really create a space and a room for experiment where really innovators and those with interesting ideas can find a platform to really set up these experiments. But of course, the next question is how to multiply these learnings, and therefore education is really an important element. Next also to, of course, networks. Networks are also important multipliers. So indeed it's, if we think about the shift towards more sustainable practices, experiments are essential and are key, but really we should also think about the multiplication, and indeed, as Elena said, we're trying to make these links, and this should really happen in order to really make the shifts.
It is all about doing it together. And we, the network that have been doing it, it's been a really unique experience for us to work so closely together as we have been doing for the last 18 months. It's invaluable knowledge, relationships have been built during this period, which I feel certain will go on for years to come. But we need more organizations and more sides of the sector to contribute to the process that we are seeing already started. So it's about more getting on board the boat. Any last questions from anybody? Yes. Oh, there and there.
Yeah, my name is Louis Valente. I'm from ASITES, which is the International Association for Theatre and Performing Arts for Children and Young People. I have been lucky to be part of the advisory board, so I have followed the process and had the chance to give some input once in a while. And one of the things I have said, and which has grown before I came here, was the attention around impact in the audience. And I think if we could have a small dimension of that, if we go into a second scheme, I think that would be wonderful, because if you talk about sustainability, we are talking about sustainability backstage, on the stage, but sustainability is also all about creating a lasting impact, and that the impact we want to create is with our audience. And I think we could enhance that in the next steps to make, how does this performance in this city change the local community? Which seeds did it plant in the minds of the children and young people and adults? And I think if we could embrace that, I think that we could grow stronger together. So I would like to cooperate around that. Ideally, we know time, money, everything is difficult, but I think this is something that we bring from our sector, because when you work for a specific audience, you think about what does this audience need. So you kind of take them into consideration from the beginning. So I could hope we could have that part of sustainability in the future together.
Thank you, Louis. Very valid point, which I think we all wholeheartedly agree with you.
Maybe I just would like to react on that. I think, very abstractly speaking, Perform Europe as a body was caring about changing practices in the sector, hoping that the sector will then address the audiences. That's a bit how the structure of the project was also built, that every of the 19 partnerships, they had all these multiple presentations. How many did we have? 99 or something like that. So they were
90 locations, 250 presentations in total.
but basically talking about locations where we talk about the audiences. So they were asked to report on the experiences of the audiences. Of course, it's a partial way to analyze what actually happened, but we, within this very short period of time, really tried to focus on the practices in the sector, like the dynamics between producers and presenters, the geographic imbalances and so forth. But it's true that maybe for the next edition, there should be kind of a better symbiosis invented, that we could hear better from the partnerships what actually happening and support them with tools to monitor that.
We are at least hopeful that it's not going to be 18 months. It's going to be a little bit longer next time around. We have one final question over there. Two, very quickly.
Hello, my name is Kate McGrath. I'm from Fuel and representing Uninvited Guests Project with our partners here. One comment about time, which is that for us it was both. The challenge was both about the shortness of the delivery period and about the recognition of the amount of time it takes to put into developing those new partnerships, echoing some of the comments on the panel around the time it takes to understand each other's context and to adapt our processes to work together. So in the end, I think I just want to acknowledge the amount of unpaid time that was contributed by all of our partners to the project, and wonder if that might be something to look at in future. But the real question I want to ask is on behalf of those organisations coming from the UK, I guess just to say how important it has been for us politically, socially, culturally, to be part of this programme. And I know that that becomes increasingly difficult, but I hope that the programme will continue to include the UK, and I'll be very interested to hear any thoughts that you have so far on that.
Ooh. Can we convince your government to join Creative Europe again?
We've been trying very hard and we need your help.
Well, we will help you. If they open the door, we will come. One final question, and then I'm afraid we have to round it up.
Yes, hello, I'm Ida from Denmark, and I also represent one of the projects that have been touring. And I don't really know how to frame this question, because I'm finding myself with a lot of emotions right now, because I'm very happy about this work that you've been doing. It gives me a lot of hope for the future, but at the same time, I feel a little bit scared that this will just fall if we don't manage to convince a lot of governments that what we're doing is actually quite crucial to society. And I'm sure everyone in this room feels that what we do is very, very important. But I also feel that, well, I can only speak for my own government, that maybe we're not so important. Maybe we're that nice extra. And so how does this contribute to that persuasion of the governments?
Lena?
I mean, it's a complicated setup of this kind of project, because it's a service contract with the European Commission. So I guess people from the European Commission can explain it much better. But we have policy recommendations which are really addressing all institutions and the member states. And they are really detailed. It's not just how we presented it now with bullet points quickly, but we do connect data and the actual demand. So once we are allowed to share it, I think that will be the real work for the upcoming several months and years, even not related to the future Perform Europe as such, but this piece of policy knowledge, we would like to bring it to the national member states. That's what we believe, just as you say, that's where actual decisions can also be taken and some important change can be brought. But currently, we are delivering our policy recommendations to the European Commission, and then we see what happens.
Thank you. This concludes this Q&A. Thank you, Ilana and Joris. We are slowly coming towards the end of this impact event. And I thank all of those that are still with us on the live stream. But we cannot leave you without addressing a little bit more with the people that have been with us on this journey, what we have learned along the way. And to lead us through that conversation, I give you Katrien Devanter, Secretary General of IFA and Vice Chair of Perform Europe, who will welcome two good guests on the stage.
Thank you indeed, Elsa, very much. I am happy to stand here for the last 20 minutes and in a way continue this conversation that just ended and invite some very respectful and knowledgeable people on stage, which is on the one hand representative and not just a representative. I can't repeat your words how you introduced Barbara, but sorry, Walter, one of the most respected personalities on the European Commission level when it comes to arts and culture, Walter Sampieri, the director of the executive agency. On the one hand, please join me here. We have Johan Floch with us representing On the Move. On the Move has been one of the advisory group already mentioned here, members of Perform Europe, and last but definitely not least, Gundiga Lavinia, who has been dedicated to selecting projects together with 10 colleagues that I also greet here in the public, 10 jury members that had the duty, very difficult task to dig into more than 500 and more, 1,329 applications in round number 1, coming down to 19. It was an incredible job, Gundiga, that you together with your jury colleagues did. This is not the least interesting panel, even though it's the last panel, because it in a way zooms a little bit out from what we just discussed from the inside of Perform Europe, maybe a little bit into the context of Perform Europe itself. As my colleagues did before, let me briefly present myself also to those not seeing me physically. I am when I'm standing up, 182 woman, you hear this already on my voice, and I have blonde colored hair, otherwise it would start to get very gray by now. I'm 43 years old, let me call this middle-aged. Yeah, come on. None, I call this already middle-aged. As I said before, let's zoom out a little bit and in a way continue the conversation that we just started here together with the audience and ask a very simple, straightforward question to the three of you as a first question. Johan, and I start with you. Also, please feel free to present yourself physically as well. Why, oh why, Perform Europe?
I mean, wow, a big question.
Big question.
I'm Jan Floch. I'm a white man in his 40s, brown hair, graying hair, facial hair, brown eyes, wearing a very colorful shirt today. Why Perform Europe? I guess it's very difficult to disconnect this quick panel from the rest of the day, and I feel both Elena and Joris put a very nice framework for this conversation by painting the landscape, not only of the performing art in Europe, European Creative Europe countries, but also by explaining all the complexities and nuances we should walk through when approaching Perform Europe. This program is very needed, and this is not only the feedback we hear from the first users, the beneficiaries, but also from the entire performing arts field that feel that it is at this European, that it is meaningful to act. And I feel that this program and the intense research and analysis that went through it demonstrate clearly that the European level is the right one to tackle this issue. And we can go back to facts and figures, to the imbalances between countries, to the very few amounts of member states giving the majority of the funding, hence favoring their national residents. So we can go to all the details to really make sure we have a common understanding of the need to act at European level.
Thanks, Johan. Gundiga, next to you, the same question, why or why Perform Europe, with the idea that I think it must have been fantastic for you. I saw you going forward when you listened to the partnerships, finally seeing and meeting you in person, what we have read before on paper, and the jury in particular. And probably many replies somehow were given to why or why Perform Europe, because that's why Perform Europe and many, many other projects on a European level. What did you add? What did you feel, and what do you want to add to this question?
Hi, indeed. Do I have to say that I'm tall, skinny, middle-aged, colored my hair for the first time a couple of months ago, not very successfully.
Oh, very nice.
And I'm super, super happy to be here in person because we, with our wonderful jury colleagues who are here, and each one of them should get a round of applause because it was really a hard job. We worked on Zoom for several months, actually, trying to, first of all, adapt to the system, which was not usual, this matchmaking, like, first of all, evaluating ideas separately, then the matchmaking, and then kind of seeing what has actually emerged during that matchmaking process, which we were not part of. And it was on Zoom, so it's so nice to see everybody in person, but it's even more nice to hear from projects and to see that this all has flesh and blood and passion, and it has actually happened. It's wonderful. When it comes to why, for me personally, it's actually not so much about how we move, but it's more about how the ways we move ask us to reimagine the ways how we create and produce artwork. And I think that's, for me, kind of substantial value of this whole project, that actually focusing on touring and mobility and how we move around brings to the surface so many questions about how artwork is actually produced. And we have been talking about it, I think, for the last 2 hours, but to me that was absolutely the interesting and essential part of this.
I agree. Walter, also for you the same question. Barbara said at the beginning there were the networks and the sector was very persistent in asking for Perform Europe for years, and none you were addressed for that. But it was not just giving up. I cannot imagine that you just thought, no, now I give up, get them this project and out of my face. But I think there was many good reasons why the European Commission at that point decided to dedicate a particular strand to Perform Europe or to the performing arts. Walter?
Absolutely. So I also have to start by saying that I'm a middle-aged white male. I'm the one with a pinstripe suit and a tie. So I guess, yes, I'm the bureaucrat in this room. But why did we do it? It's true, I mean, we've been thinking for quite some time about a scheme like Perform Europe. And it has become even more topical, actually. No, because one of the fundamental ideas of Europe, the added value of the European Union, is really connecting people. No? Mobility has always been really at the heart of whatever we were doing, at least for education and culture and other such issues. And then I suppose that the reflection about mobility has become even more important, even more challenging. It's not an easy solution, because it has to be an easy solution. No? Let's move people around. Let's move more people around. Let's meet more people. All of a sudden, well, first of all, there was a pandemic, and then there's also some very, very pressing issues that we need to tackle about mobility. So the best thing about Perform Europe is that it provided us with a laboratory, yes, with a magnifying glass, as a matter of fact, and also with what somebody said, it was share values and concrete practices. So for us, this is extremely important. This is what fundamentally we do, and that's why it will continue. I mean, I suppose it's no secret that we will, with our colleagues, we are working on the next call. We were waiting actually for your recommendations, and we will publish it after the summer, absolutely.
That is good news. And I will not leave you from this stage before replying to the UK question and all this, but we come to this a little bit later. Don't worry, don't worry. No, the next question is just for Johan and for you, Gundiga, because of course you represent the sector like many others here, artists, presenters, companies and so forth, and I cannot give the microphone to each of you, but just to the two of you, to listen to you and ask you the question, what do you think Perform Europe as a funding scheme, content-wise, needs to reflect? What is at stake within the artistic, sectorial, cultural sector that Perform Europe in one or another way needs to take up? So many projects, contents have been mentioned before. But can you share what I think you know, and you know from the European cultural context, what is at stake at this stage?
I mean, I feel we have very different points, and again, to go back to all the data analysis and findings that we do every year at On the Move, but that is reflected pretty much in the conversation of today. It feels like we need to contextualize whatever priority or conversation we want to carry out together with the performing arts field, that each time we talk about sustainability, each time we talk about immersive or participative practices, etc., we need to agree on the terms and we need to talk about this terminology. And it feels like when having such an ambitious program, we always need to go back to the arts and to the artist, but also to the values and how these values translate into very practical, concrete principles. And there is such a diversity in Europe, and we see that in the member states, but in all the Creative Europe countries. So the idea of having a very context-based approach seems very relevant. And we know that when we talk about European schemes, we dream big in a way. We want to reach out to many countries and have a very, a stratospheric view on things, and sometimes it feels on such delicate topics we need to be very close to the artistic practice, so we need to be maybe able to decentralize or to contextualize as much as possible these kind of funding schemes.
That is why it was always so valuable to have this advisory group. I see Heidi and many others here, Anita, to have that kind of feedback given to Perform Europe. We were just 5 of us sticking our heads together and on and off have this kind of input like you give now was very, very valuable in the process of Perform Europe. Gundiga.
There are so many directions, and I even don't know. I mean, there is huge demand, first of all, as we saw it. There are huge imbalances. We spoke about knowledge. The question is what knowledge Brussels wants to hear and what knowledge they don't want to hear. So shall we think about what kind of knowledge we are looking for? We mentioned skills and knowledge. I think we should, again, as you said, contextualize those things. Talking about money, again, on very kind of practical level, if we think that new ways of moving around apply new ways of creating work, we can't structure budgets in the old way. We can't put focus on planes and hotels anymore. We have to reimburse artists because traveling becomes a research and laboratory, as you said. So it's not anymore just moving from point A to point B. It's encountering a lot of challenges, a lot of discoveries on the way. So restructuring budget, restructuring kind of financial thinking. What is touring? Then when we talk again about kind of imbalances, there are those inequalities on technical level, purely technical level, like if we talk about neurodiversity or disabled artists, but then it's also kind of inequalities on ideological level, and then from country to country. So it's such a broad landscape and field, and I think, all those should be taken into consideration. Time issue that already so many people talked about, it takes time to really reimagine touring.
Did you feel, when you read these 153 applications in step 2, did you feel that you found a certain trend in a certain way when you looked at the overall bulk of applications that you see now reflected in these?
That bigger institutions and more experienced institutions know how to write applications, and we, with this short time that we are given, of course, that's okay. Yes, it's a hook, but it's not. There should be different ways of even looking at that. Language, who is English speaker, who is native English speaker, much easier to, formulate ideas, and then there are people who don't have this advantage. So again, we have this English language. Should we think what we do with that, So it's, but one beautiful thing actually was that we discovered organizations from more kind of activist civic society joining the party, which was great. Those were really, to me, very strong projects where artists matched or found common ground with activist organizations.
I got the sign of 4 minutes left, so this is question, question number 3. I say this to myself. I start with Walter now, picking up at the same time the UK question in your reply. Maybe question is, what should a fund on a European level do and what can it not do? There is things that a European fund should probably not do. There is other levels that should take care of that.
What are the levels? No, local, regional, state, national, and then European and international. What is it that we cannot do, from Brussels? Clearly, we cannot support every single theater, we cannot support every single cultural center. Probably it wouldn't be even a good idea. Even if we could to do it, no, it has to be bottom up. So what we cannot do really, even if we design the best program ever with all the money that we have, we wouldn't be able to walk the last mile. No? That has to be done by somebody else. But if you take also the other view, what a local level, what a local development level, what local authorities, what regional authorities can do and what they cannot do. For them it's very difficult actually to establish connections with more than 1 or 2 partners, simply because they're spending their own taxpayers' money at the end of the day. So how can they justify that the money will go to Sweden and not to Spain and not to Portugal and not to Greece? So it's quite difficult for them. This is also why you don't have that many structural funds, actually cultural projects that go beyond the border of one nation. If you go Interreg, yes, from Italy to Austria, they work together. But Italy and Sweden, well, who would pay for that? Yeah. So this is at the very basic level what the European Union can do. Then there is a how. Okay, this is what we could do, but why should we do it? And we want to do it because we want to show that we do have actually shared values. There is such a thing as bringing us together. So we do have a vision which is a little bit farther, let's say, that local authorities, local and also regional authorities. What we're doing is, because we want to tap into the, I say it very often, the transformation power of culture. And the transformation power of culture is basically to bring us together and to imagine a better vision of the future. No? So isn't it fantastic if we can do it at continent level and we are the only ones who can do it at the end of the day? Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true. Johan, your vision, if you have to pitch Perform Europe, what should this fund do in the future?
What should it do? It should navigate the paradoxes of being a scheme entirely focused almost on distribution of artistic work, cross-border distribution of artistic work, but solving so many other issues in terms of networking for professionals, networking for artists, making, etc. So we need to be also to acknowledge the limits of what we are designing in a way, and to say if we go for a distribution scheme, we should always have in mind that other schemes might be created in the future, and we might advocate for that. Or we might trust that the Commission also have in mind all these other priorities for other Creative Europe programs, Erasmus Plus programs, etc., but not try to put everything in just one scheme, because we all know how sometimes it doesn't work. And I would say the last thing is to think about the sustainability of the scheme itself. There's a word that was pronounced several times, roller coaster. And to lead such an experiment, we need to take care about the ones that are carrying this, the organization behind, the teams behind, so all the artists applying, all the producers applying, etc. So it shouldn't be a roller coaster, and this is one of the learnings for me, is to see that in the future there will be, in a way, more time, more human resources, more financial resources, more, good conditions.
Oh, time is running. Always in life it goes on. But I want to hear Gundiga's pitch as well for Perform Europe, what it can do and should not do. Gundiga, before we conclude.
I think it should do, in the first place. I think it's already great that it is agile, I think more agile than some other funding schemes. It is really following the voice of artists and producers. I think it should shift, probably focus even more to artists, and we should break out from those silos, presenter, producer. I think we all are into this together, and that's also reimagining mobility. And it should be able to imagine multiplicity of centers and just really network of centers. It's not only here, and that was your question, how this wonderful knowledge will be distributed. Will it reach those geographically far points that we want to so much, be part of it? It's an important question.
And I think one element of the replies is time. Time is running. Elsa, I think I have to conclude this panel, hand over to you, and please invite us for a drink.
Thank you so much, Johan, Walter, Buntika, and Katrin, for this final panel of today. And yes, indeed, this is it, dear folks. Artists, presenters, stakeholders, performing arts community, all those that are with us here in this space and in the digital realm. We thank you for being with us. We are very happy to know that this 18-month roller coaster experiment called Perform Europe will not stand alone, but will be continued through a call to be launched by the European Commission come September. We in the performing arts therefore have another opportunity to develop this program and funding scheme further and learn from the mistakes of the pilot as well as the achievements. The sun is really shining here in Brussels. I bid you all farewell, and I wish you the best of summer to come.